Hi subscribers and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about two very important forms of protection. First, critical illness cover and income protection. Protection is a common area that gets overlooked in financial planning. People are often very focused on their savings, their investments, their growth, their pensions, etc. But protection and what might happen in an event of you not being able to work or you not necessarily being here is extremely important and should be a key area that a good holistic financial planner should be talking to you about. I'm joined this morning by Dylan Baker, one of our independent financial advisors here at Cameron James, who specialises in protection. Good morning, Dylan. How are you?
Morning, Dom. Doing well. How are you?
Very good, very good. So Dylan, I would like to start off, I already know the case, because I've been through this case with you as your CEO, but I would like to get into it in a bit more detail. So if you could outline to me what made this case interesting when you were introduced to the client.
Yeah, so it's a pretty unique set of circumstances. The client's a business owner, but he runs a business through his house/farm and is the main breadwinner in the house. So his wife supports him within the business, is a director of the business, but doesn't have an external job outside of the family business. So it's very much the husband, if he can't work, then it affects the whole situation within the house. What became alarmingly apparent when we were having our initial meeting and we were talking about something completely separate, was the lack of personal cover that this client had for if he remained alive but was unable to work. So he had all forms of life insurance sort of coming out of his ears, so to speak. If he passed away, this is what happens with the money to his wife, to his children, but nothing in place if he remained alive but couldn't work, which is actually more expensive. So one of the things we explored was a form of insurance called KIC, or critical illness cover. So providing a tax-free lump sum up to the insured amount for things that I call the big nasties. So your heart attacks, your cancers, your strokes, your tumours. And making sure that tax-free lump sum means that you can take your time with returning back to the workplace without having to worry about bills being paid, without having to worry about everyday business needs, and focusing on yourself to get yourself better and healthier. Now, the client didn't have that in place at all. So I recommended that we cover the client's salary for a period of 12 months as an insured cover. So it worked out that the client had been taking an income in the region of £70,000 a year. So we looked at around £70,000 worth of critical illness cover. On the flip side, we then looked at what's called IP, or income protection, for this client, which complements a critical insurance policy, although they're separate entities in their own right. An income protection policy will then cover you for pretty much everything that a GP could sign you off from work for outside of the big nasties. So the main claims for an income protection policy tend to be things like depression, bad back, stress. And that pays out a tax-free monthly lump sum of up to 70% of an individual's net monthly income until the earlier of them returning to work or retiring. So they work really well hand in hand with each other.
And with this client coming through, did the client come through and was looking for protection advice, or were they coming through talking about savings and investments? How did the flow of this advice process go with the client?
Sure. So my initial conversation with the client was around his pension. And this is a common theme. So the general subject starters tends to be pensions. But what the clients don't always fully grasp is what an independent financial advisor can do on a holistic basis, what we call full fat financial planning. So when it became apparent that the conversation with insurance hadn't happened with this client in a previous life, we covered it off in full. The client then fully understood what it was and fully understood the benefits of it, and now actively has the policy in place.
And why would you say critical illness cover and income protection were both necessary in this client's situation?
Because of how heavily the family relied on him. It is the simple and straightforward answer, Dom. So Some parts of critical illness cover aren't covered. If, as an example, the client had a really bad back, couldn't do his part of the manual job that he has, that wouldn't be covered under a critical illness policy, but it'd be covered under an income protection policy. So what we've done, rather than loading the client up with an excessive amount of critical illness cover, is we've split it between the two to make sure that the client's covered comprehensively, and therefore the family is indirectly covered in the process.
Yeah, and like, how would you say, what's the difference between someone who is potentially just working as the main breadwinner, but in this instance, they're the main breadwinner and the business owner at the same time in the family?
So the breadwinner part is generally covered off by the critical illness cover. The income protection would cover whatever his earnings would have been if he couldn't work. So if you're a business owner, your time is your own money. So the income protection policy covers your time and therefore your money.
And from the client's perspective, given that he already had life insurance, you mentioned, was that term insurance that he had or whole of life insurance that he had?
It was term assurance. So for the viewers out there who aren't familiar with the differences, term assurance, as the name suggests, only covers you for a term, a period. So as an example, 20 years. What that means is if you die in year 21, no one gets anything. But if you die in year 15, as an example, there would be a payout. Whole of life's a guaranteed payout at any point in that individual's life. Naturally, it's more expensive than term insurance as a result of it. The client had term assurance or has term assurance. It makes sense in this instance for the client to have term assurance because he's got loans and debts that have end dates on them. Mortgages, as an example, business loans within the company, but the client's on track to pay off his loans by sort of retirement age. The mortgage is due to be paid off, so the client will be as asset rich as he'll ever be at retirement age and debt poor at retirement age, so it makes no sense to have the life cover carrying on thereafter. What the client has said, though, and made it explicit, is he has no plans to retire and, quote, wants to work until he drops. Well, if he's going to work until he drops, then it makes sense to have some insurance in place for when he does.
Understood. What do you think the financial consequences would have been for this client's family if he had fallen seriously ill without cover? I know you've already mentioned that he's the main breadwinner in the family, but what would that have looked like specifically for this client's family?
Well, it would have been horrendous, to be perfectly honest. So if this client had been off for a year, that the monthly expenses aren't just their own personal life expenses. They have the monthly expenses of the business, which is also the client, right? So there's all of the machinery, there's the business, there's both of their personal lives, there's the family. And it works out to be that the expenditure that the clients go through on a monthly basis that they can cover off because the client's healthy and working, it would be, they'd be eating into their savings exponentially more than the cost of the premiums for the cover.
Understood. So what advice in your experience of, working with critical illness cover and protection cover insurance, what would you say would be your general advice to people as business owners who are kind of considering, or maybe they haven't even thought about this yet, in terms of the type of protection or cover which they need for themselves and their family?
Yeah, so I'd say if you're thinking about it, there's probably a reason that you're thinking about it, and to trust your gut instincts. So the worst that I can say to you, or the best I can say to you from a peace of mind standpoint, is if you sit down with me, is that you've got all of the perfect arrangements in place, and I couldn't do a better job, and then I'd shake your hand and you'd have the peace of mind from an industry expert that you've got everything in place that you need. How many times do I see that? Not very often, but it's always worth a conversation.
Yeah, and I think, again, viewers, it's always a case of, as I stressed at the beginning of this video, whilst pensions and transfers and getting the best level of returns and consolidating pensions is an extremely important part of your financial planning, if you're lucky enough to have defined contribution or potentially even defined benefit plans as part of a two-advisor model here, looking at the protection side of things is also so important. We don't know what's going to happen now or in the future. We know what the ONS statistics are in the UK, circa 84 years, but some of us are going to live longer than that, some of us are going to live less than that. And if you are that person in the family who has that responsibility or that pressure, even if you're in a joint couple, but your expenditure is quite high and you need both of your salaries in order to be able to afford that, having a look at things like this is extremely important. And even if you walk away from that decision saying, okay, one of the advisors that Cameron James or Dylan has outlined to me what the difficult situation would be if I don't take out a policy like this, you at least then know. So you're sort of aware of the decisions you're making. But yeah, for us here, clients who are not looking at insurance and protection, it is really sad. Clients should be looking at all areas of their finances to try to ensure themselves and their families are best catered for. Dylan, thank you very much for joining, and yeah, look forward to speaking with you soon.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Dom.
You're most welcome. And viewers, as always, take care with UK pension assets.